Hey everyone, what's up everyone? Hi, how you go? How you doing? Okay. Wow, this is very intellectual start to this kind of intellectual new thing that I'm trying to do. Actually, let me switch some windows real quick. There we go. That's a lot better. Today I just wanted to like do something a little different. I wanted to like start reading. I haven't really been doing much with my Twitch channel. I used to like play video games or whatever. But I wanted to like start like actually like sharing information because I feel like now more than ever, information needs to be shared. Intelligence needs to be spread, critical thinking needs to be done. So I wanted to start with the first book, which is The Thinker's Guide to Fallacies, The Art of Mental Trickery and Manipulation by Dr. Richard Paul and Dr. Linda Elder. I have a copy right here myself. I'm going to be reading to you guys. Um I guess that's just about it. That's basically what the stream is. I don't necessarily I don't even know where I was going. This is a new thing that I'm doing. I'm sorry. Um, I just wanted to start with I guess a quick overview. I have read this myself back in college. It is a pretty decent book. I a little bit of a note I would say about it. These are called Thinker's Guides. I read a couple of them back when I was in college, and they are really well written books. I think they are really good material to consume. I don't necessarily think guide is the right thing to say about them. They are very informative pieces of material, but I don't think they're really like guides to like live by or anything. But another reason why I'm really doing this is because not everyone gets the opportunity to get their hands on these kind of publications. And as for me in particular, I believe that information like this and like a lot of the other books that I want to read for this series, if you want to call it that, I feel like information like that should be publicly available, at least public knowledge. I'm not going to condone doing any kind of illegal activities like um taking copyrighted material and like republishing it or like stealing it or whatever. This is just me reading it, so it's just going to be me and my performance. I wanted to make sure that I'm not like violating any TOS rules or any copyright laws in particular by doing this series. So why don't we go ahead and get started? This book, it has a different cover than one of the other covers of this book. I don't know when this cover came out or when this cover came out, but it's using like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of analogy, as mental trickery and like fallacies are kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde scenario. And the front of the book has a quote actually by Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from chapter 10. That's a Robert Louis Stevenson book. With every day, and from both sides of my intelligence, the mortal and the intellectual, I thus drew steadily nearer to that truth, by whose portrayal discovery I have been doomed to such a dreadful shipwreck that. Sorry, it's a little dark in here, actually. Do I have any other. Here, I'm gonna change the lights real quick to just make them maybe a little brighter. Alright, that's better. Okay. There was something on the page. Okay, I'm gonna start over. With every day, and from both sides of my intelligence, the mortal. Oh my god, hang on. My eyes are getting bad or something. I swear we're going to be reading today. Alright, that's better. With every day and from both sides of my intelligence, the moral and the intellectual, I thus drew steadily nearer to that truth, by whose partial discovery I have been doomed to such a dreadful shipwreck. That man is not truly one, but truly two. I'm probably not going to need these the entire time. I haven't used my reading glasses in forever. I used to need one of me when I was younger. But that's neither here nor there. Let me put this stuff away just so it's out of the way and not bothering me. Okay, but without further ado, let's read the introduction by the authors themselves. This is a quote by Anon. To understand the human mind, understand self-deception. That's a very short quote. The word fallacy derives from two Latin words, phallax, deceptive, and fallere, to deceive. This is an important concept in human life because much human thinking deceives itself while deceiving others. The human mind has no natural guide to the truth, nor does it naturally love the truth. What the human mind loves is itself, what serves it, what flatters it, what gives it what it wants, and what strikes down and destroys whatever threatens it. The study of fallacies can be pursued in at least two different ways. It can be approached traditionally, in which case one defines, explains, and exemplifies ways in which unsound arguments can be made to appear sound. Or it can be approached deeply, in which case one relates the construction of fallacies to the pursuit of human interest and irrational desires. Using the first approach, students gain little by memorizing the names and definitions of fallacies. They soon forget them. Their minds are left largely untouched and therefore unmoved. On the other hand, the second approach makes possible the acquisition of lifelong insights to how the mind, every mind, uses unsound arguments and intellectual tricks to further its ends. When we look closely at human decisions and human behavior, we can easily see that what counts in human life is not who is right, but who is winning. Those who possess power in the form of wealth, property, and weaponry are those who decide what truths will be trumpeted around the world and what truths will be ridiculed, silenced, or suppressed. The mass media of the world generate an unending glut of messages that continually sacrifice truth to spin. When we reach beneath the surface of things, we find a world in which the word communication and the word manipulation collapse into virtual synonyms. Students need seminal insights and intellectual tools that enable them to protect themselves from becoming intellectual victims in a world of swarming media piranhas, or just as bad. Sorry, I might. I actually might need my reading glasses today. From joining the swarm of junior piranha in training, insights and tools grounded in intellectual integrity should be the ultimate aim of the study of fallacies. They have been our aim in this guide. That is by Richard Paul, Center for Critical Thinking, and Linda Elder, Foundation for Critical Thinking. So yeah, these authors are both proprietors of critical thought, and they have done a lot of books and research on the topic. So let's start with the first chapter. This is only like 50 pages too, so it's not going to be like super long, and it's a good thing that it's not going to be super long because I do have a meeting to go to after this. Like, finally, I have a freaking something to do, you know? I have a meeting at 7, so if we don't finish this, I'm going to unfortunately have to stop it, but I'm pretty sure we can get through it. This is only like 50 pages, yeah. Truth and deception in the human mind. The human mind is a marvelous set of structures and systems. It is a center of consciousness and action. It forms a unique identity. It creates a view of the world. Rich experience emerges from its interactions with the world. It thinks, it feels, it wants. It apprehends truths and suppresses errors. It achieves insights and fabricates prejudices. Both useful truths and harmful misconceptions are its intermixed products. It can as easily believe what is false as what is true. It can see beauty in right conduct and justify what is flagrantly unethical. It can love and hate. It can be kind and cruel. It can advance knowledge or error. It can be intellectually humble or intellectually arrogant. It can be empathetic or narrow-minded. It can be open or closed. It can achieve a permanent state of expanding knowledge or a deadening state of narrowing ignorance. It both transcends the creatures of lesser ability and insults their innocence and nobility by its self-deception and cruelty. How can humans create within their own minds such an inconsistent amalgam of the rational and the irrational? The answer is self-deception. In fact, perhaps the most accurate and useful definition of humans is that of the self-deceiving animal. Deception, duplicity, sophistry, I don't even know how to pronounce that word, sophistry, delusion, and hypocrisy are foundational products of human nature in its natural, untutored state, rather. Rather than reducing these tendencies, most schooling and social influences redirect them, rendering them more sophisticated, more artful, and more obscure. To exacerbate this problem, not only are humans instinctively self-deceptive, they are naturally sociocentric as well. Every culture and society sees itself as special and as justified in all of its basic beliefs and practices, in all its values and taboos. The arbitrary nature of its folkways is known as its anthropologists, if it has any, but not to its overwhelmingly majority. I'm sorry, that's anthropologists. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm so used to like reading like on my own. I know that I'm like a little bit of a slower reader when I read out loud, but I got pretty like, I read a lot on my own. Like I can read like a Wikipedia article in like a matter of like a couple minutes probably, depending on like the length and everything and how dense it is. But I'm not typically like, I'm not trained to read out loud, so I do apologize if this is a little bit of a slow read, but hopefully you guys are still like getting the information that the book is elevating. Elevating? That's not the right word. Escalating? No, that's not it either. One of those words, probably. It's trying to convey. That's it, convey. Like, oh, conveyor belt, right? Okay, anyways. Uncritical persons, intellectually unskilled thinkers. The overwhelmingly preponderance of people have not freely decided what to believe, but rather have been socially conditioned, indoctrinated in brackets into their beliefs. They are unreflective thinkers. Their minds are products of social and personal forces they neither understand, control, nor concern themselves with. Their personal beliefs are often based on prejudices. Their thinking is largely compromised of stereotypes, caricatures, oversimplifications, sweeping generalizations, illusions, delusions, rationalizations, false dilemmas, and begged questions. Their motivations are often traceable to irrational fears and attachments, personal vanity and envy, intellectual arrogance, and simple mindedness. These constructs these constructs have become a part of their identity. Such persons are focused on what immediately affects them. They see the world through ethnocentric and nationalistic eyes. They stereotype people from other cultures. When their beliefs are questioned, however unjustified those beliefs may be, they feel personally attacked. When they feel threatened, they typically revert to infinite thinking and emotional counterattacks. When their prejudices are questioned, they often feel offended and stereotype the questioner as intolerant and prejudiced. They rely on sweeping generalizations to support their beliefs. They resent being coerced, disagreed with, or criticized. They want to be reinforced, flattered, and made to feel important. They want to be presented with a simple-minded black and white world. They have little to no understanding of nuances, fine distinctions, or subtle points. They want to be told who is evil and who is good. They see themselves as good, in quotes. They see their enemies as evil, in quotes. They want all problems to admit to a simple solution and the solution to be one they are familiar with. For example, punishing those who are evil by use of force and violence. Visual images are much more powerful in their minds than abstract language. They are overly impressed by authority, power, and celebrity. They are mentally ready to be directed and controlled as long as those doing the controlling flatter them and lead them to believe that their views are correct and insightful. The mass media are structured to appeal to such persons. Subtle and complex issues are reduced to simplistic formulas. Get tough on crime. 3 strikes and you're out. Adult crime, adult time. You are either for us or against us. Spin is everything. Substance is irrelevant. So a little bit on that. I am personally I don't believe in the power of good versus evil. I don't believe there is that wars and stuff, human violence and everything should be denoted by good versus evil. Evil does exist in the world. I am not saying that. Obviously, there are some evil individuals out there, but I always see conflict in humanity as a war of ideals. People with varying ideologies. And these, what the book calls uncritical persons, these uncritical persons are adopting predisposed ideals instead of receiving their own, having the knowledge to actually go out and create their own ideals, living life as an individual rather than someone who just took whatever was on the docket for on what the news says, pretty much. Hey Jan, how's it going? I'm reading a book today. Actually, let me change this because this doesn't really go with how I'm dressed. Will you freaking... Alright, that's a little better. I know this is like irrelevant to what I am currently in, but I like to have it like that. Alright, let's move on to skilled manipulators, weak sense critical thinkers. There's a much smaller group of people who are skilled in the art of manipulation and control. These people are shrewdly focused on pursuing their own interest without respect to how that pursuit affects others. Though they share many of the characteristics of uncritical thinkers, they have qualities that separate them from uncritical persons. They have greater command. They have greater command of the rhetoric persuasion. They are more sophisticated, more verbal, and generally have greater status. On average, they have more schooling and achieve more success than uncritical persons. They typically acquire more power and occupy positions of authority. They are accustomed to playing the dominant role in relationships. They know how to use the established structure of power to advance their interests. Since they are fundamentally concerned not with advancing rational values, but with getting what they want, they are careful to present themselves as sharing the values of those they manipulate. That sounds really familiar with this current administration, am I right? Skilled manipulators are rarely insightful dissenters, rebels, or critics of society. The reason is simple. They cannot effectively manipulate members of mass audience if they appear that mass to be invalidating their beliefs. Manipulators do not use their intelligence for the public good. Rather, they use it to get what they want in alliance with those who share their vested interests. Manipulation, domination, demagoguery, and control are their tools. Oh, demagoguery. That's right. Okay, there's a little footnote. A demagogue is never a true critic of society, but a sophist. For he/she tries to stir up the people by appeals to emotion, prejudice, etc., in order to win them over quickly and so gain power. That is from the Webster's New World Dictionary. By the way, this was written back in 2012, if that gives any context to these writings. Persons skilled in manipulation want to influence the beliefs of their behavior of others. And they have insight into what makes people vulnerable to manipulation. As a result, they strive to appear before others in a way that associates themselves with power, authority, and conventional morality. This imputes. I'm sorry, how do I even pronounce that? Impetus? This impetus of evidence, for example, when politicians appear before mass audiences with well-polished and intellectually empty speeches. There are a number of alternative labels for the roles that manipulators play, including the spin master, the con artist, the sophist, the propagandist, the indoctrinator, the demagogue, and often the politicians in quotes. Their goal is always to control what others think and do by controlling the way information is presented to them. They use rational, again in quotes, means only when such means can be used to create the appearance of objectivity and reasonability. The key is that they are always trying to keep some information and some points of view from being given a fair hearing. Let's move on to fair-minded critical persons, which are strong-sense critical thinkers. These are who I hope that more people become, you know? Finally, there is an even smaller group of people who, though intellectually skilled, do not want to manipulate and control others. These are the people who combine critical thought, fair-mindedness, self-insight, and a genuine desire to serve the public good. They are sophisticated enough to recognize how self-serving people use their knowledge of human nature and command of rhetoric to pursue selfish needs. They are acutely aware of the phenomenon of mass society and of the matriarchy of mass persuasion and social control. Consequently, they are too insightful to be manipulated and too ethical to enjoy manipulating others. They have a vision of a better, more ethical world, which includes a realistic knowledge of how far we are from that world. They are practical in their effort to encourage movement from what is to what might be. They gain this insight by struggling with their own egocentric nature and coming to see in deeper and deeper ways their own involvement in irrational processes. No one becomes a fair-minded thinker first and a selfish person later. Selfish thinking is instinctive. It is an inborn state. We're all initially focused on ourselves, our own pain, desires, concerns. In the first instance, we pay attention to the needs of others only to the extent that we are forced to do so. Only through a commitment to our own fair-mindedness. The key is that fair-minded people constantly strive to achieve the widest, most informed viewpoint. Fair-minded persons want no point of view to be suppressed. They want public discussion to include equal coverage of dissenting as well as dominant viewpoints of view. They want people to learn how to detect when someone is trying to manipulate them into believing or doing what they would not believe to do had they access to more information or further reasoning from dissenting points of view. They want everyone to see through the dirty tricks of manipulative persuasion. They want to publicly disclose situations in which people of wealth and power are manipulating people with little wealth and power. They want to help people recognize how the wealthy and powerful often prey on the credulity, gullibility, and vulnerability of the poor and poorly schooled. It should be noted that those we call the manipulators are often the victims of their own propaganda and devices, caught up in their own propaganda and narrowness of vision. They sometimes fail as a result. Many businesses fail because of their inability to critique their own illusions. Nations often fail to act successfully because their leaders are caught up in their own unrealistic descriptions of the world and of their enemies. Manipulators are not usually grand conspirators. Their one-sidedness is obvious only to those who can appreciate the difference between self-serving and fair-minded thinking. Only those capable of self-critique and self-insight can... I'm sorry, I got the hiccups. Only those capable of self-critique and self-insight can accurately assess and the extent to which they are involved in the social, psychological, and intellectual manipulation of others. The concept of fallacies of thought. The meanings of the word fallacy found in the Oxford English Dictionary are 1. Deception, guile, trickery, trick. Trickery and trick. Okay. 2. Deceptiveness, aptness, and aptness to mislead, unreliability. 3. A deceptive or misleading argument, a sophism. In logic especially, a flaw, material or formal, which vitiates a syllogism, syllogism? Sure. Also sophistical reasoning, sophistry. 4. A delusive notion, an error, especially one founded on false reasoning. Also the condition of being deceived, error. 5. Sophistical nature, unsoundness of argument. Erroneousness, delusion. The word fallacy derives from two words. I already said that earlier in the introduction, it was provided. To be a human thinker is often to be self-deceived. A self-deceived thinker, and hence a fallacious thinker. However, to think of ourselves as being what is false, or as defending and justifying prejudices, stereotypes, and misconceptions is a painful thought. The human mind has developed ways to protect itself from that pain. These ways have been labeled by psychologists as defense mechanisms. They deny or distort reality. Their use is not deliberate or unconscious, but unpremeditated and subconscious. They include They include repression, projection, denial, rationalization, and stereotyping. Naming fallacies. The philosopher Schopenhauer is, in commenting on tricks of persuasion, once remarked, "It would be a very good thing if every trick could receive some short and obviously appropriate name, so that when a man used this or that particular trick, he could at once be reproved from it." Unfortunately, there are an unlimited number of maneuvers that can make in camouflaging poor reasoning, making bad thinking look good, and obscuring what is really going on in a situation. Furthermore, most people are resistant to recognizing poor reasoning when it supports what they intensely believe. It is as if people subconsciously accept the premise all is fair in the scramble for power, wealth, and status. Any argument, any consideration, any mental maneuver or construction that validates emotionally charged beliefs seems to be the believer to be justified. The more intense the belief, the less likely that reason and evidence can dislodge it. Most people believe in, but are unaware of, the following premises. 1. It's true if I believe it. 2. It's true if we believe it. 3. It's true if I want to believe it. 4. It's true if it serves my vested interest to believe it. The human mind is often myopic, inflexible, and conformist, while at the same time highly skilled in self-deception and rationalization. People are by nature highly egocentric, highly sociocentric, and wantonly self-interested. Their goal is not truth but advantage. They have not acquired their beliefs through a rational process. They are highly resistant to rational critique. Blind faith, fear, prejudice, and self interest are primary organizers of much human thinking. Self delusion, in conjunction with lack of self command, characterize much human thinking. A highly compromised integrity is the result. If you point out a mistake in thinking to most persons, you may silence them momentarily, but most, like rubber bands that have momentarily been stretched and let go, will soon revert to whatever it was they believed in the first place. It is for this reason that cultivation of intellectual virtues is so crucial to human development. Without a long term transformation of the mind, little can be done to produce deeply honest thought. When challenged, the human mind operates from its most primitive intellectual instincts. This can be verified in the history of politics, economics, religion, and war. Indeed, in a history that deeply plumbs the human mind in action. Consequently, it is important to learn to recognize the most common tricks of persuasion that we might better understand ourselves and others, used on others, fallacies and intellectually indefensible tricks of persuasion and manipulation. Used on ourselves, they are instruments of self-deception. In this guide, we concentrate on the most common and flagrant intellectual tricks and snares. Sometimes these tricks are counterfeits of good thinking. For example, a false dilemma is the counterfeit of a true dilemma. We shall see this most obviously in dealing with errors, generalization, and comparison. Mistakes versus fallacies. What about mistakes, you might ask? Isn't it possible that some of the time we commit fallacies inadvertently, unintentionally, and innocently? The answer is, of course, yes. Sometimes people make mistakes without any intention of tricking anyone. The test to determine whether someone is merely making a mistake is thinking is relatively simple. After the mistake is pointed out to the person and the person is explicitly faced with the problems in the thinking, observe to see whether he or she honestly changes. In other words, once the pressure to change is removed, does the person revert to the original fallacious way of thinking, or does he demonstrate that he has truly been persuaded and modified his thinking accordingly? If the person reverts or invents a new rationalization for his behavior, we can conclude that the person was using the fallacy to gain an advantage and not making a simple mistake. So this is something that I see pretty heavily in the far right movement. A lot of individuals within those movements tend to use a lot of fallacious arguments and create new arguments to just spread their hatred and bigotry towards other individuals. There is no exhaustive list of fallacies. It is not possible to create an exclusive and exhaustive list of fallacies. The intellectual tricks, traps, and snares humans so commonly engage in or fall prey to can be described from many differing standpoints and in a variety of differing terms. In this guide, we deal only with those most common or most especially recognized. There is nothing sacred about our list or our analysis. Here is a list of common problems in human thinking. See if you can add any to this list. It is common for people in their thinking to be unclear, muddled, or confused. jump to conclusions, fail to think through implications, lose track of their goal, be unrealistic, focus on the trivial, fail to notice contradictions, use inaccurate information in their thinking, ask vague questions, give vague answers, ask loaded questions, ask irrelevant questions, confuse questions of different types, answer questions they are not competent to answer, come to conclusions based on inaccurate or irrelevant information, use only the information that supports their view, make inferences not justified by their experience, distort data and represent it inaccurately, fail to notice the inferences they make, come to unreasonable conclusions, fail to notice their assumptions, make unjustified assumptions, miss key ideas, use irrelevant ideas, form confused ideas, form superficial concepts, misuse words, ignore relevant viewpoints, fail to see issues from points of view other than their own, confuse issues of different types, lack insight into their prejudices, think narrowly, think imprecisely, think illogically, think one-sidedly, think simplistically, think hypocritically, think superficially, think ethnocentrically, think egocentrically, think irrationally, be incompetent at problem solving, make poor decisions, lack insight into their own ignorance. Again, this is not like an exhaustive list. There are many different ways of fallacies coming to fruition in lines of argument. Few of these flaws fall neatly under traditionally fallacy labels. Nevertheless, it is useful to have some sense of what the common fallacies are and of how to distinguish them from sound reasoning. All fallacies result from an abuse of a way of thinking that is sometimes justified. For example, generalization is one of the most important acts of human thinking. Making comparisons by analogy and metaphor is another. As we begin to focus on fallacies, we will begin with a detailed emphasis on generalizations and comparisons, and the errors of thought that emerge from their misuse. We will then focus in detail on some of the most widely used fallacies. We do not have the space to approach all fallacies in the same detailed way. In total, we focus on 44 fallacies, which we introduce as 44 foul ways to win an argument. We view these fallacies as unethical strategies for winning arguments and manipulating people. They are the dirty tricks of intellectual life. Those who use them with success are able to do so precisely because at some level they deceive themselves. They deceive themselves into believing that their reasoning is sound. I know it kind of looks bright in here. That's because I have like lights pointed at me, but I don't have really a lot of light pointed at the page. I have the window open. Let me open the window a little more. There we go. Hopefully that's a little better. Oh yeah, I can see a lot better now. But that's not gonna last very long because the sun will set. The sun will set probably in like an hour. Faulty generalizations. As humans, we live in a world of abstractions and generalizations. All words that name or characterize what we think about are products of the mental act of generalizing. There's a long footnote about what generalizing is, but I'm pretty sure a lot of us know what generalization is, so I'm just gonna skip over that part. I'm not gonna read the footnote. If you guys wanna pick up this book for yourselves, find any means necessary to get it. But as semantics rightly remind us, cow 1 is not cow 2 is not cow 3. Each and every existing thing is unique. Bishop Butler put this point in a memorable way in remarking, everything is itself and not another. Despite the uniqueness of things, the world we use in categorizing what we experience glosses over uniqueness and concentrates on similarities or differences in general. As such, we talk in general terms about tables, chairs, cows, crows, people, poems, and social movements. Despite the fact that there are useful things we can say about individual tables, chairs, cows, crows, people, poems, and social movements, we are nevertheless forced to generalize in countless ways. We talk in general terms about nearly everything that interests us: life and death, love and hate, success and failure, war and peace. We should be careful, therefore, not to triumph in a decision by saying that is a generalization and therefore automatically faulty. We must remember that generalizing is integral to foundations of communication. It enables us to construct the concepts through which we conduct all of our thinking. And there's another footnote here. I'm going to go ahead and read that one. As an exercise, you might reread this paragraph, noting as you go how many general ideas are in it, each with a range of generalizations behind them. You might also notice that in this section of the text, we are making generalizations about generalizations. Oh my god, I'm sorry. I love highbrow humor. For a particular generalization to be a fallacy, it must be based either on too few instances or unrepresentative ones. For example, if we meet 3 amusing Italians while on a visit to Rome, we are not justified in making the generalization that all or most Italians are amusing. There is no reason to think that the 3 we met were representative of all or most Italians. On the other hand, determining whether a generalization is justified is not merely a matter of counting instances. For example, if if you touch a hot stove and burn your hand, one instance should be enough to convince you of the wisdom of the generalization. Never touch a hot stove with your bare hand. On the basis of very few experiences, you would be justified in making the even wider generalization: never touch extremely hot objects with your naked flesh. Well then, how can we ensure that we are making justifiable generalizations? The answer is that we need to make sure we have sufficient evidence to justify our generalizations. For example, the more diverse the group we are generalizing about, the harder it is to generalize in a justifiable way about it. Thus, it is easier to make generalizations about frogs given the consistency of frog behavior than it is about domesticated dogs, whose behavior varies more from dog to dog and dog species to dog species. In a like manner, it is easier to generalize about domesticated dogs than it is about humans, whose behavior varies along many parameters. Humans' behavior Humans' behavior is highly diverse. Consider yourself as an example. You were born into a culture, European, American, African, Asian. You were born at some point in time, in some century, in some year. You were born in some place in the country, in the city, in the north or the south or east or west. You were raised by parents with particular beliefs about the family, personal relationships, marriage, childhood, obedience, religion, politics, schooling, etc. You come to the world with certain predispositions that influence your development as you interacted with your environment. Oh, hey, Bill 10, what's up? You formed various associations largely based on who was around you. Associations with people who had distinct viewpoints, values, and who adhered to certain taboos. Because of all these influences, you are a complex and unique individual. One should therefore be cautious in forming generalizations about you, just as you should be cautious in forming generalizations regarding others. This does not mean, of course, that there are no important generalizations we can make about humans. For example, there are features we share with all other humans. For instance, given that we know about the human mind, we can make the following generalizations. It is essential. 1. It is essential for our intellectual growth that we come to know the scope and limits of our intellectual capacities. That's cat food. 2. Most people do not recognize their tendency to think egocentrically and ethnocentrically. 3. Most people resist understanding the implications of their social conditioning and the ethnocentrism inherent in it. One important series of studies, the Milgram experiments, which, if you want to know more about that, go to www.stanleymilgram.com. But these experiments document the human tendencies to conform uncritically to the commands of authority figures, even when those authority figures have no power to punish or compel them to conform, and even when the authority figures are asking them to do what they know to be unethical. Another series of studies of the mutual images of the enemy document a striking intellectual disability of humans. It occurs when groups come in conflict with each other for the same goal. Each side to the conflict then attributes the same virtues to itself and the same vices to the enemy. We are trustworthy, peace-loving, honorable, and humanitarian. They, our enemies, are treacherous, warlike, and cruel. We can readily find examples of this phenomenon in the daily news, which is filled with positive characterizations of our side and caricatures of those who oppose us. Self-aggrandizing generalizations that feed the human ego are always welcome and easily believed. Negative generalizations of those who oppose us are also welcome, as easily believed, and for similar reasons. As social animals, we do not want to face our fear and distrust of members of groups we oppose. We avoid facing the fact that we are very much like the people we hate and fear. The pain, the suffering, the waste of resources, the result from acting on the thinking we generate egocentrically and sociocentrically boggles the mind. Analyzing generalizations. If we are to aspire to reasonability, we must be willing to question our own generalizations as well as the generalizations of others. We must be willing to strip the labels off of the objects of our experience and ask ourselves again and again, what do we really know about this or that other? Traditionally, faulty generalizations have been labeled either hasty or unrepresentative. We boil these labels down to two pieces of advice. First, begin to recognize when generalizations are being made. And second, determine whether the generalization is supported by sufficient evidence to justify it. In other words, make sure you have taken the time to accumulate enough facts to support generalizations, and make sure the evidence you have is representative of the full range of relevant information. Qualify your generalization whenever necessary. Most, many, some, a few, rather than all. Remember that you are a human and speak a human language, and that the language you speak is shot through with generalizations and abstractions. Try to develop the ability to strip off whatever language you are inclined to use in interpreting the facts inherent in your experience, i.e., confine yourself to the statement of specific facts without putting a spin on those facts. See whether you can more accurate, precise, and less biased in your descriptions by reducing your interpretive generalizations to a minimum. Consider now the following examples of generalizations commonly made by people, some of which are reasonable, others not. So this is the first example. Yesterday I met the most remarkable person. He or she is kind, considerate, sensitive, and thoughtful. Here's a comment. Generalizations about the character of a person after just one day with them are rarely justifiable. I mean, for me, I always give people a benefit of the doubt. If I have like a good experience, like a good first experience or first impression of that person, I think they are a good person, but usually that does come later that like not everyone is as good as they seem to be when you first meet them. Like I had friends, I had an old friend group and I thought they're all my friends and like we're all cool. These people are gonna be my friends for a lifetime, and that didn't happen. Here's another example. Well, are you going to stand up for your country? I thought you were a patriot. Here's a comment. The suppressed generalization here is, one should never criticize one's country because such criticism is inconsistent with loyalty. By the way, people who unconsciously make this political generalization often make a similar one about love between humans. If you really loved me, you wouldn't criticize me. Both generalizations ignore the fact that reasonable critique is a necessary and healthy element in creating a better world. Many of our greatest critics have also been our greatest patriots. Tom Paine is a case in point. Okay. Nice take, bro. But this kind of like goes with a recent post or like statement. I don't know what it was, like that the president made about trans people. And there's more people that are against this current administration than just trans people, you know? I think it's like a big generalization to say that like you're un-American if you follow these certain guidelines. Like, I was born and raised here. I believe strongly in this country. I think geographically it is an impeccable space, right? I love the diversity that America brings, but I don't agree with everything that the administration is bringing up. I don't agree with a lot of it, actually. And a lot of people don't. There's a reason why his favoritism is going down. His numbers are they're dropping. They are dropping, man. As a good thing. It's people are speaking up, and more people should be speaking up about it. Here's another example. Why do you always have to be so critical? Can't you just be human for once? Besides the fact that so critical, is the comment, by the way. Besides the fact that so critical is overtly vague, we have the suppressed and absurd generalization that critique is inhuman. Note also the suppressed generalization that you are always critical. That you are sometimes critical is possible. That you are often critical is possible. But that you are always critical is highly unlikely. Here's another example. No, I'm not a rational person. I have feelings. Here's a comment. These statements imply that being reasonable and having feelings are incompatible. Not so. A reasonable person can have feelings as intense as those of an irrational person. The difference is that the emotional responses of the reasonable person make sense. They fit the criticism. I'm sorry. They fit the circumstances. A reasonable person is more integrated, lives fewer contradictions, has greater insight and has greater insight. They didn't have an "and" in there. For a rational person, the consistency between thought, feeling, and desire lays a foundation for intensity and commitment. The generalization that being reasonable and having feelings are incompatible is based on a stereotype, not an insight. Well, there's a lot of examples. I was like, oh, it's only this one page, and now it's like a whole other page. So let's read another example. Let's face it, the answer is love. That's the only way to create a better world. Here's a comment on that. While I do believe in that, that is very much a huge overgeneralization that doesn't really mean anything. If everyone loved everyone else, no doubt we would have a better world. True. But how is all this love to be produced in a world shot through with greed, violence, selfishness, and cruelty, all of which result from innate egocentricity and ethnocentricity? How would we change people's thinking so as to bring about this massive outpouring of love? The notion that love is the answer is not it's not a very helpful generalization. It needs to be qualified in a multitude of ways. So you can like go living your life, and like I do too, with like the notion that love is the answer for many of the world's problems. If we all loved each other and everything, but there needs to be like actions. There needs to be more deeper critical thinking than just going like, oh, we'll just love each other. We'll just love each other. Because to some people, that's an impossibility. There are a lot of hatred. There are a lot of hatred. There is a lot of hatred out there. There's a lot of hateful people out there. I don't know how to change your mind though. That's something that we as a human society need to work on together. Let's read another example. The money we are spending to save lives by preventing bioterrorism makes little sense when compared with what it would cost to save lives through other means. We spend hundreds of billions to save lives that might be at risk while we allow hundreds of people to die every day on the home front. According to the Institute of Medicine, some 18,000 people die prematurely every year as a result of being uninsured. That's 6 9/11. Okay. This example was adapted from an article in the San Francisco Chronicle. Oh my god, man. That was back in 2003? Okay. Wow, 6 9/11s. Bro, was that a little too soon? 2003, maybe a little too soon? Anyways, here's a comment. If the facts asserted are correct, the reasoning is this example makes an important point. The generalization implicit here seems justifiable that money spent to save lives should be spent where it will do the most good. Here's another example. There's enough food produced in the world to feed everyone. Why do I say so? Here's why. World production of grain alone is over 1.5 billion tons, enough to supply the entire population with 2 pounds of grain per day. This, with the current production of vegetables, fruits, nuts, and meat, is enough to supply each man, woman, and child with 3,000 calories a day, equal to the consumption of an average American. Here's a comment. If the facts asserted are correct, the reasoning makes an important point. The generalization that there is enough food produced in the world to feed everyone is plausible. Here's another example. Last example. Hunger is the result of overpopulation. If people had fewer children, they would not be hungry. Here's a comment. In assessing this statement, let us consider some relevant facts. According to the Institute for Food and Development Policy, found at foodfirst.org, overpopulation is not the cause of hunger. It is usually the other way around. Hunger is one of the real causes of overpopulation. The more children a poor family has, the more likely some will survive to work in the fields or in the city to add to the family's small income and later to care for the parents in their old age. High birth rates are symptoms of the failure of a social system. Inadequate family income, nutrition, education, healthcare, and old age security. If the facts asserted in this report are correct, the generalization above is not justified. My cat over here is snoring. In examining generalizations, make sure you understand precisely what is being said. For example, if someone comments on the importance of loving the country, one would do well to spend some time spelling out what precisely is and is not implied by this expression. For example, what exactly is it that one is supposed to love? The land, the weather, the ideals, the mass media, Hollywood movies, the criminal justice system, the medical system, puritanical attitudes, the politicians, the laws that have been passed, the wealth, the military, the foreign policy. Once one is clear about what generalization is saying and not saying, it is important to determine the information and evidence that would be required to justify it. Moreover, as we have mentioned before, it is important to minimize faulty generalizations by carefully using qualifiers like most, some, and a few. Remember these rules. Don't say all when you mean most. Don't say most when you mean some. Don't say some when you mean few. And don't say few when you mean just one. Post hoc generalizations. Post hoc ego propter hoc. Post hoc ego propter hoc. That is, oh, it's Latin. I'm like, that is quite the phrase. So post hoc ego propter hoc is a Latin phrase for a well-known mistake in generalizing. It literally means after that, therefore caused by it. Okay, I know what that is. It refers to the mistake of inferring that something that came before something else must necessarily have caused it. Here's an obvious example of it. Yesterday, I got a stomach ache after doing algebra. I will avoid doing algebra in the future. Here's another. Yesterday, my son was in a car crash. Right before it happened, I had a feeling something bad was going to happen. This proves you can hurt people you love by thinking negative thoughts about them. That is incredibly superstitious. The fact is that before any given event happens, other things happen, usually many, many things. That does not mean that all of these earlier events caused what came afterwards. Monday comes before Tuesday, but does not cause it. Summer comes before fall, but does not cause it. I put on my shoes before I eat my breakfast, but putting on my shoes does not cause me to eat my breakfast. We're going back to the examples, I guess. Okay, there's only a couple examples. First example. The last time we had a major strike of teachers, a student died in a fight. That just shows you the irresponsibility of teachers striking. There's a comment. Sorry, but no causal connection has been established. The mere fact that the strike occurred prior to the fight is no good reason to consider it a cause. Example 2. And last example, too. Last time I had dinner at Jack's house, I had a bad stomach ache the very next day. The food at Jack's house must have been bad. Here's a comment. I'm afraid we must decline this post hoc generalization about the nature of the food at Jack's house. There are many other possible causes of the stomach ache in question. You could check and see whether the other people who ate at Jack's house also got sick. So, I guess this was kind of a post hoc generalization that I have made in the past. I went to this place. It was a Mexican Korean fusion food place, and my partner and I went there together. We ordered different things, and we both ended up getting the worst food poisoning ever. Like, this goes like towards like this particular example. We both got like the worst food poisoning ever, and it was horrible. I had like really bad stomach pains and excretions for nearly 2 weeks. And I'm not maybe it's not a post hoc generalization because my fiance also got food poisoning. I don't think everyone who ate there ever got food poisoning. I guess we just had like a bad day. Maybe they just didn't have like the best food prepped, but it could be post hoc, couldn't. Who knows? Still never eating there again. Analogies and metaphors. We seek to understand new experiences and phenomena by linking them to what we already understand. When we explicitly recognize that the similarity is only partial, we should recognize that we are speaking analogically or metaphorically. The basic difference between an analogy and a metaphor is simple. When we put the word like in our description, we create an analogy. He is like a rat. That's a simile. Yeah, I mean, it is an analogy, right? It can be both. Yeah, they're using he is like a rat as a simile, but it's also like an analogy. Okay, so next example, when we omit the word like, we create a metaphor. He is a rat. I always like found those two to be like um the opposite of a metaphor is a simile. That's when you use like or as, whereas a metaphor it is you use is. They're saying it's an analogy. I don't know if I necessarily follow that line of logic because you can make analogies without using like or as. Analogies and metaphors help us make sense of the world. We often explain something by comparing it point by point with something similar. Metaphors and analogies provide provisional models for understanding what we don't yet literally understand. There are, in any case, three kinds of statements: literal statements, analogical statements, and metaphorical statements. There are many tree stumps in this forest, which is literal. A tree stump is like a chair in the forest. Analogical. They're using a simile. Every tree stump is the forest, and there are thousands is a tribute to the power of the lumber industry and a testament to its indifference in, in ecology. That's a metaphor. That's metaphorical. Let us now move to some examples of analogies or metaphors. Both are used to make sense of things. Let us consider how useful or illuminating each attempt is. In some cases, we need to clarify the statement and context before evaluating it. Here's the first example. And we got a lot more examples about these things. Oh, next is the actual freaking fallacies. we're on page 16 already, and there's only like 50 pages. All right, here's the first example of analogies and metaphors. Life is like, well, they're already using like. Life is like a beautiful and winding lane. On either side, bright flowers, beautiful butterflies, and tempting fruits, with which we scarcely pause to admire and taste. So eager are we to hasten to an opening which we imagine will be more beautiful still. That is a quote by G.A. Sala. Here's a comment. What do you think? Leave it down in the comments below. We're not gonna answer it. No, each of us must consult our own experience to decide how useful this analogy is. Okay, so this is an analogy that is dependent on the person's own proper experience. In my line, I guess a lot of us don't really stop and admire the flowers. I have been trying to take walks. We have a local park around here, and I just like walk around it just for my mental health and also for a little bit of my physical as well. And I like to tend to admire the beauty of the world. I know I don't catch all of it, but I catch as much as I can, and I feel like that's relevant to like a lot of us. Unless like some people are very like narrow-minded on one set path. But who knows? It's a person-to-person kind of basis to derive that analogy. Here's another example though. Life is the childhood of our immortality. That is a quote by Goethe? Goethe? I don't know. Here's a comment though. This analogy assumes the existence of God and the soul. If you grant this assumption, then the analogy holds. If you don't, then it doesn't. Okay. I don't know if it's very black and white like that, but I don't know. That's what is written. Example. Common sense does not ask an impossible chessboard, but takes the one before it and plays the game. That's Wendell Phillips. Here's a comment on Wendell Phillips. His quote: "The point behind this metaphor is that rather than trying to make the impossible happen, we should deal with the inescapable realities of our lives. Can anyone argue with that? Perhaps not. But there may be much argument about what is actually impossible and what is inescapable." I agree with that. Here's another example. "The question is, are you going to stand up for your country or not?" Oh yeah, that kind of mirror is like that's like a complete mirror of a quote from earlier. Oh, this quote was, "Well, aren't you going to stand up for our country? I thought you were a patriot." And this one's, "Question is, are you going to stand up for your country or not?" It's the same parroted kind of mentality. What does stand up mean? This is the comment. What does stand up mean? Why not lie down for your country or jump up and down for it? The speaker is no doubt asking us to act patriotically. Patriotically? I think I said that right first time. Whatever. But what does that mean? In one interpretation, my country, right or wrong. You defend your country even when it is waging an unjust war. Look at the news. If you refuse to do so, you are labeled unpatriotic. In another interpretation, it is your duty to support your country in a war if it is justified, in all caps, and to oppose it if it is not. I don't believe that the actions that are being taken in our country right now are entirely justified. I think there was a point where this war could have been avoided, but that was completely disposed of to the wayside. And yeah, I'm not for anything that's happening right now in the country, or not anything. I'm making like generalizations myself. It's obvious that okay, it's not obvious. Well, now I need to like make an actual freaking comment on this stuff, or else I'll be accused of generalizing things. And do I really need to do that right now? We're here to read a book, not express my personal opinions. These are my personal views and opinions, and other people have their own personal views and opinions. They're not always sound opinions, in my personal opinion. But that comes down to what I believe, instead of like conflict being a notion of good versus evil, it is always a conflict of ideologies. My personal ideologies condemn what is happening in the country right now. A lot of the things that are happening in the country right now. There are some good things, obviously. Or maybe not obviously. That's all. Saying obviously is a generalization in and of itself. But I'm not going to get into it right now. If you want to ask me my thoughts personally, hit me up on Discord. Here's another example. Oh, let me get back to the book. "War is the business of barbarians." That's a quote by Napoleon himself. There's a comment. So the shortest comment ever, too. To the shortest quote as well. "It is too bad that Napoleon did not mean what he said." Oh my god. Savage. Savage, bro. Also, that comment's kind of a generalization in and of itself. Anyways, not everyone knows the history of what Napoleon did and everything, right? Not everyone. Not everyone knows their history. Jesus Christ. Well, why is what happening in the country right now happening? Because people don't know their history. Oh my god. Okay, here's a quote from when I said evil. Uh when I said I believe in evil, yeah, fascism is a thing, and here's the biggest fascist of them all. At least in our kind of recent history. And who knows? It could change depending on how our government moves forward. But here's this example. The blood, and only the blood, of the German people will determine our destiny. There's a quote from the Fuhrer himself. I don't think I need to repeat his name. Here's a comment though. A typical statement of one of the world's most notorious sophists and demagogues. Vague, threatening, and misleading. A parable paraphrase might be Germany will win in any conflict if Germans are willing to die to bring that about. Another possible interpretation might be Germany is the master race and racial characteristics are what determine who ultimately wins or loses. You know, I'm not gonna comment on any of that stuff. Let's just move on to the next one. Example. The chief evil of war is more evil. War is the construction of all human crimes. Here is its distinguishing accursed brand. Under its standard gather violence, malignity, rage, fraud, perfidy, rapacity? I think that's rapacity, and lust. If it only slew man, it would do little. It turns man into a beast of prey. There's a quote by Channing. Here's a comment. Few people think of this metaphor when patriotic music is playing and the troops are marching off to wage war. Do you agree or disagree with the metaphor and or the point behind on our comment on it? Yeah, I agree. That's all I'm gonna say about that. I got a book to read. 44 foul ways to win an argument. If you want to become aware of how politicians, the news media, and advertising industry, public relations experts, government officials, and assorted friends and enemies use the arts of manipulation and con artistry against you, enter their point of view, rather. Learn the art of intellectual dirty tricks so that, if necessary, you can outthink the thinkers. First, remember that those who strive to manipulate you always want something from you. Your money, your vote, your support, your time, your soul, something. But they also need you to be unaware of what they are about. They always have something, often a lot, to hide. In any case, their goal is not the use of sound evidence and valid reasoning. In every case, they insult our intelligence by assuming that a manipulative trick will work on us, that we are not insightful enough to see what they are doing. Your goal should be to recognize fallacies for what they are, the dirty tricks of those who want to gain an advantage. Fallacies are therefore stratagems for gaining influence, advantage, and power over the sheep of society, so to speak. You will withstand their impact more effectively when you know these fallacies inside and out. When you come to see how counterfeits of good reasoning pervade everyday life and are the lifeblood of the mass media, you are better able to resist their influence. When you are Inoculated against fallacies, your response to them is transformed. You ask key questions. You probe behind the masks. The front of the fronts, the fostered images, the impressive pomp of ceremony. You take charge of your own mind and emotions. You become increasingly your own person. Let us now turn to some of the most prominent fallacies used in thinking. As you read through these dirty tricks, or as you listen to these dirty tricks, imagine yourself instructing unscrupulous persons in the art of manipulating the sheep of the world. Imagine yourself in the business of seeking influence over others. By the way, I'm going to pause right here and just like explain something because I'm not sure like a lot of people understand this analogy, the sheeple analogy, calling other people sheep. If you know how sheep act and everything, there is a shepherd and he controls his flock. Sheeple, or calling a person a sheep, it's another analogy, right? It's saying that these people are blindly following whatever their believers are, or whatever they believe in, right? In Christianity, the sheep analogy is, and the shepherd analogy is utilized quite often. So individuals who blindly follow a faith or belief just because they're told it, they're regarded as sheep by some individuals. Now, some people utilize this analogy without even recognizing that they are sheeps themselves. I think it was the what was it, the Hetero Awesomeness Fest? There was a musician that went on stage with in the background it said like "Wake Up Sheeple" or something. Not really understanding what that analogy really implicates. Let's go back to the book though. You want to get their vote, support, money, or what have you. Something is at stake that you care about. You face some opposition. You want to win the argument, gain the influence. And you don't care at some level what you have to do to achieve your goal. What can you do? Use any one or more of these 44 foul ways to win 44 foul ways to win an argument described in this section. If you don't mind being unscrupulous, you can manipulate and control the simple-minded. These foul ways work even with otherwise highly sophisticated persons. You can observe the practices of politicians and other propagandists, successfully using them every day. And don't worry about feeling guilty. Your instinctive skill and self-deception will most likely keep you from noticing that you are doing something unethical. Here is your battery of strategies for overcoming your conscience. 44 foul ways to win an argument. Before we go into those fallacies, I have been myself seeking alternative political ideologies. I think I'm kind of settled on anarchism, and I've kind of always been with an anarchist mentality myself. Not that I'm going to be like rioting or anything. I'm not an extremist or anything. There's a such thing called pacifist anarchism. I follow like the philosophical mentalities of what I'm hearing about anarchism, and they kind of like I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. They're pretty copacetic with a lot of my personal beliefs on government practices and sociopolitics. But I have been like talking to other people. I've been talking to someone with the RCA. They're the Revolutionary Communists of America. I've been talking to the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America. The Revolutionary Communists, I have some thoughts on their organization, not always the best thoughts, but I actually want to say that for a future thing that I'm working on. I'm trying to get someone from there on Cutie Spectives, actually. And I'm trying to get people from other organizations on Cutie Spectives as well, because I am just kind of fixated on the subject at the moment. Not that I condone any kind of like extremism or violence on any side of things. The right wing's white nationalism has done so before, caused violence, caused irreversible harm on society. I don't, left or right, like extremism is it's dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing because like you're not seeing your opposition as another human being. And I think that's something that we need to avoid. We need to avoid seeing the other as nothing more than an opponent to your own beliefs and ideologies. I think it's more important to see the human first and foremost of anyone else. I guess that's what you call the what do they call in this book? The fair-minded critical person in me. Anyways, let's read these 44 dirty tricks, and I think that's pretty much it's not the rest of the book, but this is a big section in the book. We're on page 19 so far, so we're almost like halfway through it, right? Not even halfway through it. And I got a meeting in like an hour. I gotta stop like going off different diatribes. So here's dirty trick number 1. Accuse your opponent of doing something he is accusing you of, or worse. This is sometimes called pointing to another wrong. When under attack and having trouble defending themselves, manipulators turn the tables. They accuse their opponent of doing what they are being accused of. You say that I don't love you. I think it is you who does not love me. Manipulators know this is a good way to put your opponents on the defensive. You may want to up the ante by accusing your opponent of doing something worse than what he is accusing you of. How dare you accuse me of being messy? When was the last time you even took a shower? Here's dirty trick number 2. Accuse him of sliding down a slippery slope. That leads to disaster. A slippery slope is used when a person implies that if someone does one thing, it will eventually lead to a domino effect of negative things that in the end will result in something terrible. In other words, person A is not so bad, or thought A. I guess the A is the thing that this person is doing. In other words, A is not so bad. But A leads to B, and B leads to C, and C is horrible. Imagine a mother lecturing her teenage daughter. Okay, maybe there is nothing wrong with a kiss, but remember where kissing leads and where that leads and that. Before you know it, you'll be the mother of an unwanted baby. Jesus Christ. Your young life will be ruined forever. Manipulators who use this argument conveniently forgetting that many people walk carefully on slippery ground and don't fall down. So trick number 3. Appeal to authority. Oh my god. This is also traditionally called argumentum ad veracinium. Veracinium. As appeal to authority. I personally am of the belief of living without appeal, but let's not get into that right now. let's see what they have to say about appeal to authority. Some people are in awe of those with power, celebrity, or status. In addition, there are many sacred symbols, flags, religious images, sacred words, etc., to which people feel intense identification and loyalty. So when I went to No King's protest, I actually draped an American flag on my back as like kind of like a cape, right? Me identifying the way I am is considered a terroristic action. So I did my own kind of defense in that and defiance of that in wearing the American flag, which a lot of people identify the symbol as a power, you know? A lot of people are drawn to the American flag as it is it's representative of the ideology of freedom to the individual. And you know, here in America, we are taught in schools to say the Pledge of Allegiance, put our hand over our heart, and recite this every single day before we even start school, just to continue to capitalize on this ideology of freedom. And this flag is what represents what the individuals think of as what is freedom. And so that's basically why I why I wore an American flag to No King's protest, and I got a few compliments on it too. So I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty cool. It was fun. It was a fun little protest. Totally peaceful and everything. I know there were some states, some cities, some small groups of individuals who cause riots, and they're, I guess, free to do so in their particular sense, but I am not of that line of reasoning, you know? I am not a proprietor of violent action at any kind of cause, but at the same time, the police kind of do the exact same thing. They're kind of the instigators of a lot of those protests turning into riots, because a lot of people are protesters of police officers. It's not like when the Charlottesville incident happened and all the right-wing extremists just ran a car through counter-protesters or started like fights against counter-protesters. It wasn't against the police or anything, you know? Anyways, I went on another digression. Let's continue with this. Though power, celebrity, and status rarely correlate in any way with knowledge and insight, people are mesmerized by them. Demagogues that successfully manipulate people know that most people are readily tricked in this way. So they wrap themselves in the flag and associate themselves with power, celebrity, or status in any way they can. This includes looking for scientists and other knowledgeable persons to support their views. Cigarette companies once hired scientists who were, in effect, prepared to say that there was no proof that cigarettes caused lung cancer, though they knew or should have known that the proof was there. Cigarette companies also founded the American Tobacco Institute, a body of researchers supposedly seeking to discover the effects of smoking on health. In reality, the researchers were seeking to defend the interests of the tobacco industry under the guise of scientific authority. They deceived millions of people and caused millions of deaths along the way. Naturally, they could only do this by deceiving themselves into thinking that they were simply being scientifically careful. And of course, they made a lot of money in the process, which strongly influenced their ability to deceive themselves. This happens quite a lot. That's one example of something like that happening. I know that there were studies done by the CIA, or commissioned by the CIA. That is the Counterintelligence Agency of America. Yeah, there are many. There are many. I wouldn't say that there are a few, or some, or even one. There are many. There's probably not, like, thousands. I don't know, there could be thousands. I don't think it's very quantifiable, because a lot of that stuff is hidden from public eye. Let's go on to dirty trick number 4 before I start sounding like a conspiracy theorist. Appeal to experience. Skilled manipulators, con artists, and politicians often imply that they have experience to back them up, even when their experiences are limited or non-existent. They know it is much harder for someone to deny what they say if they speak with the voice of experience. Of course, they will sometimes come up against an opponent who has more experience than they do. In that case, they attack their opponent's experience as not representative, as biased, as limited, as distorted, or as subjective. Dirty trick number 5. Appeal to fear. America does this a lot too. Deep down, most people have a lot of fears. Fear of death, fear of disease, loss of love, loss of attractiveness, loss of youth, loss of income, loss of security, rejection by others. The unprincipled manipulators know that people tend to react primitively when any of these fears are activated. Thus, they represent themselves as having the ability to protect people against these threats, even when they can't. Distrust authorities who say that certain groups or people are inherently dangerous. Remember, these people are threatening our freedom, our way of life, our homes, our property. Politicians often use this strategy quite effectively to make sure people line up behind governmental authority and do what the government, that is, what politicians, want. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on, especially with marginalized individuals right now in the country, and like immigrants, and not even immigrants either, just like even people who have been born in America are like under scrutiny right now. And I guess I'm one of those individuals as well. Dirty trick number 6. Appeal to pity or sympathy. Manipulators know how to portray themselves and their situation in such a way as to make people feel sorry for them or at least gain their sympathy, especially when they don't want to take responsibility for something they have done. Consider the student who, when confronted with the fact that she hasn't done her homework, whines and says something like, "You don't understand how hard my life is. I have so much to do. It's very hard for me to get my homework done. I'm not lucky like some students. Since my parents can't afford to send me to college, I have to work 30 hours a week to pay my own way. When I come home from work, my roommate plays music until midnight, so I can't study. What am I supposed to do? Give me a break." Appeal to pity can also be used to defend someone the manipulator identifies with, as in, before you criticize the president, recognize that he has the hardest job in the world. He must stay up late at night, worrying about our well being, trying to find a way to act in the welfare of all of us. The fate and weight of the free world rests heavy on his shoulders. How about some consideration for the poor man? Use of this poly enables the manipulator to divert attention from those innocent people harmed by presidential decision or policy. Dirty trick number 7. Appeal to popular passions. This is traditionally called argumentum ad populum. Manipulators and other masters of counterfeit subterfuge and ruse are careful to present themselves as people who share the values and views of their audience, especially the sacred beliefs of the audience. Everyone has some prejudices, and some people feel hatred towards something or someone. Masters of spin stir up prejudices, hatred, and irrational fears. They imply that they agree with the audience. They act as if they share their views. They work to convince the audience that their opponent doesn't hold sacred the beliefs they hold sacred. There are many possible variations on this strategy. One has been called the just plain folks fallacy, in which the manipulator says or implies something like this: it's good to be back in my home, city, state, country, whatever, and with people I can really trust. It's great to be with people who face things squarely, who use their common sense to get things done. People who don't believe in what is that word? Highfalutin ways of thinking and acting. Oh, high fault. Okay, it's written in as if the individual has like kind of a southern accent, I suppose. They believe in highfalutin ways of thinking and acting. Oh my god. Okay. Very conservative mentality. Dirty trick number 8. Appeal to tradition or faith. The tried and true. This strategy is closely related to the previous one, but emphasizes what seems to have passed the test of time. People are often enslaved by social customs and norms of their culture, as well as traditional beliefs. What is traditional seems right. This is the way we have always done things. Manipulators imply that they hold firm to what their audience is familiar and comfortable with. They imply that their opponent will destroy these traditions and faith. They don't worry about whether these traditions harm innocent people, like the cruel customs of laws against blacks before civil rights movement. They create the appearance of being independent in their views, while the views they independently reach just happen to coincide with those of the crowd. They know the people are usually suspicious of those who go against present social norms and established traditions. They know enough to avoid openly opposing the social customs to which people are unconsciously and slavishly bound. Dirty trick number 9. Assume a posture of righteousness. People begin with the deep-seated knowledge that their nation, their religion, their motivation is especially pure and ethical. We sometimes bungle things, but we are always pure of heart. We hold the highest ideals of any country. Of course, we make mistakes and sometimes commit fallacies. Follies, rather. It's mixed folly with fallacy. But our intentions are always good, unlike others in the world We are innocent of guile. We're good-hearted. National and international news designed for national consumption is always written with the premise in the background. With this premise in the background. We may blunder, but we always intend to do the right thing. Manipulators take advantage of this questionable premise by speaking and writing with such assumptions in the background. This posture is related to the fallacy of begging the question that leads to question-begging epithets. And then you'll see it says see question begging, which is number 11. Okay. First, though, trick number 10. Attack the person and not the argument. This was traditionally called petito principi. No, traditionally called argumentum ad hominem. When the opponent makes reasonable arguments, manipulators ignore these arguments and instead find a way to personally attack the reasoner. Name-calling, even mudslinging, often works depending on how you do it. The spin artist knows what a particular audience will reject and institutes that his opponent supports those terrible things. For example, the opponent might be labeled a communist or an atheist, or it might be said of him that he supports terrorism or is soft on crime. This strategy is sometimes called poisoning the well. It leads to the audience dismissing an opponent in a sweeping way, no matter what the opponent says in his defense. Of course, the spin artist knows the importance of correctly reading the audience to make sure that he doesn't go too far. He realizes that the more subtle he can be, the more effective his manipulation will be. Which is strange because that's not what our current president does. he's pretty vocal on it, and people just like start on listening. I don't know. Maybe people aren't listening. Trick number 11, beg the question. This is the one that is traditionally called petito principi. One easy way to prove a point is to assume it in the first place. Consider this example. Well, what form of government do you want? A government to buy liberal do-gooders ready to spend your hard-earned dollars, or a government led by business minds that understand how to live within a tight budget and generate jobs that put people to work? This statement includes the following assumptions that should not be taken for granted. 1. That liberal government would spend money unwisely. 2. That business people know how to live within a tight budget and generate jobs that put people to work. One variation of this fallacy has been called question-begging epithets. The use of words or phrases that prejudge an issue by the way the issue is put. For example, shall we defend freedom and democracy or cave into terrorism and tyranny? By putting the question in this way, we avoid having to talk about uncomfortable questions like, but are we really advocating for human freedom? Are we really spreading democracy, or just extending our power, our control, our dominance, our access to foreign markets? Pay close attention to the words people use when articulating the facts. With respect to an issue, they will often choose words that presuppose the correctness of their position on an issue. Dirty trick number 12. Call for perfection. Demand impossible conditions. Your opponent wants you to agree to X, and you realize that you can't argue against X without losing credit in the eyes of the audience. Fine, agree to X, but only under the following conditions. Yes, we do want a democracy, but only when we can have a true democracy, and that means this and that will have to be changed before we consider it. By making a maneuver of this kind, you divert the audience so that they do not discover that, in fact, you have no intention whatsoever of allowing X to take place. This is similar to dirty trick number 32, raising nothing but objections, which I guess we'll get to once we get through these other, 20 tricks. Let's move on to number 13. Dirty trick number 13, create a false dilemma. The great either or. A true dilemma occurs when we are forced to choose between two equally unsatisfactory alternatives. A false dilemma occurs when we are persuaded that we have only two equally unsatisfactory choices when we really have more than two possibilities available to us. Consider the following claim. Either we are going to lose the war on terrorism, or we will have to give up some of our traditional freedoms and rights. People are often ready to accept a false dilemma because few feel comfortable with complexity and nuanced distinctions. They like sweeping absolutes. They want clear and simple choices. So those skilled in manipulating people face them with false dilemmas, one alternative of which is the one the manipulator wants them to choose, the other alternative clearly unacceptable. They present arguments in black or white form. For example, you are either for us or against us. You either support democracy and freedom or terrorism and tyranny. They realize that only a small minority of people will respond to such a false dilemma with the observation, but these are not our only choices in between the extremes of A and Z are options B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, etc. Dirty trick number 14. Devise analogies and metaphors that support your view, even if they are misleading or false. An analogy or metaphor is a comparison that is not literally true. Consider, don't you think it is about time for us to slap down those judges who are soft on crime? There are two phrases in caps are used metaphorically, slap down and soft, right? They are not literally intended. They are metaphors attractive to many people whose information about the criminal justice system principally comes from cops and robbers, television shows, and sensationalized stories in the mass media. To win arguments, then, manipulators use comparisons that make them look good and their opponent look bad. You are treating me like any father used to treat me. He was so unfair and so are you. Or, the way you are treating me is like kicking a horse when he is down. Can you see I have a hard day? I've had a hard day? The analogies and metaphors that work depend in part on the prejudices and beliefs of the audience. This means understanding the worldview of the audience as well as the root metaphors underlining them. For example, if manipulators are trying to influence someone with a religious worldview, they're more likely to be successful using religious metaphors and analogies. Of course, the skilled manipulator knows that when talking to a fundamentalist Christian, it is a mistake to choose metaphors from the Quran, right? Dirty trick number 15. Question your opponent's conclusions. The manipulator wants to lead the audience to accept the conclusions. He wants the audience to reject the conclusions or interpretations of his opponent. If he remembers the Latin phrase non sequitur, which means literally it does not follow, he can accuse his opponent of being illogical and call into question his opponent's reasoning. As soon as his opponent asserts a conclusion, the metaphor can say, wait a minute, that does not follow. Your conclusion does not follow from your premises. If you said X and now are saying Y, how did you get from X to Y? How can you justify such a leap? What you say is not logical. You haven't proven Y, only X. Through this strategy, the manipulator can obscure any legitimate points made by the opponent. At the same time, he himself will seem to be logical and dispassionate. Dirty trick number 16. What time is it? Oh my god, I gotta go in like 30 minutes. I thought I could finish this book, and we're only like halfway done. Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to finish this book today. I might schedule another reading session in the future, probably like in a week. But sometime before June, because I am doing Play is Love again this year. But let's just continue. I'll call it when I need to call it. Actually, let me double check and make sure. Let me check my email. Make sure the meeting is at set. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got a meeting in 30 minutes. Dirty trick number 16. Create misgivings. Where there's smoke, there's fire. The manipulator knows that once serious changes are made against a person, it may be difficult, if not impossible, for the accused to clear away the suspicion that there must have been something to the charge. Lingering suspicions may destroy a person's chance to maintain his honor in the public eye. Rumors take on a life of their own. This is therefore one of the foulest of the 44 foul ways to win an argument. During the McCarthy era, many families, friendships, and careers were destroyed because of the power of rumor and the where there is smoke, there is fire mentality. Senator McCarthy and his Committee on Un-American Activities would drag people before a public tribunal and imply that if they truly loved the country, they would cooperate with the committee by giving them the names of persons with left-leaning views. When their request was refused, the vast television audience would draw the conclusion that the uncooperative citizens are communists and therefore un-American. Most people who elected to challenge the Committee of Un-American Activists lost their jobs. Their families were ostracized. Their children mocked and bullied at school. Most were blackballed and could no longer find employment in their profession. Of course, this making of perverse charges can often be done off the record in private conversation. Once the rumor is launched, there is no need to do more. People love to spread stories. Of course, I don't believe it, but did you know that there has been some talk of Jack beating his wife and children? Ugly, isn't it? When this trick is used by governmental officials, it is usually called spreading disinformation, fake news, false charges that the government knows will be believed. For example, planting stories about atrocities of one country, which never in fact occurred, is very effective for validating an aggressive attack by another country. Man, can I even say his name? I'm gonna just say it. Yeah, Makar. That was the Red Scare. Yeah. Uh, Hitler used this strategy effectively. The U.S. government has been spread disinformation. For example, to justify sending Marines into Central or South American countries to dispose one government and put a more friendly government into power. The fact that these stories will be discredited years later is no consequence, of course, to the fabricators of such stories. Disinformation often works. The discrediting of it is usually too late to matter. Hang on. The discrediting of it is usually too late to matter. Okay. Years later, people don't seem to care. Since most people think in simplistic ways, manipulators and politicians can often get them to reject someone simply by mentioning something about the person that seems inappropriate or that goes against social conventions. For example, Kevin has already admittedly smoked marijuana. That tells us a lot about him. Or, look at that teenage girl wearing a skimpy top. I guess we know what she is after. That is a creation of a misgiving. Okay. This is a lot of people's favorite fallacy. Creating a straw man. This is dirty trick number 17, according to the book. Manipulators know the importance of making their opponents look bad. Whatever the views of the opponent, a skilled spin master can make the opponent appear to take another, far less believable view. The trick of misrepresenting someone's views to gain an advantage is sometimes called creating a straw man. A straw man is literally not real, though it may look like it is. A straw man argument then is a false or misleading representation of someone's reasoning. Suppose someone wanted to reform our criminal justice system so that fewer innocent people were wrongly convicted and thrown into prison. His opponent may well retort with the following strawman argument. So I guess what you want is to free all criminals and leave us even more threatened than we are now. Of course, no one said or wants that. So he is arguing against a straw man. By misrepresenting a person's position and presenting it in a form that people will reject, he successfully uses the straw man strategy. Of course, in addition to misrepresenting the opponent's argument, he can also claim that the opponent is misrepresenting his. In this case, the spin master can then claim that it is the opponent that is attacking a straw man. In any case, the manipulator wants to ensure that the best representation of his reasoning is compared with the worst possible representation of his opponent's reasoning. Manipulators make their opponent look bad. At the same time, they make their own case look good. Imagine that an environmentalist makes the following argument. Each of us must do our part to reduce the amount of pollution we are creating on the planet. The automobile industry, for example, needs to find alternative forms of fuel cleaner forms of fuel. Cleaner forms of fuel. He just said it weirdly. We need to move away from gasoline as our primary automobile fuel source. Otherwise, our planet will needlessly continue to suffer. A manipulator who is seeking to discredit the environmentalist might misrepresent him as follows. What my opponent is really arguing for is more big government. He wants to take away your right to choose and give bureaucracy more and more power over your life. Don't let him get away with it. That's not what he's saying, but alright. Let's see, there's 44, so I think I'm going to finish these last 2 pages and then call it. So we got a little bit more to go, because I got a meeting to do. I'm going to come back to this, though, where we are going to finish this book. This might be, like, next week or something. And I might throw in, like, an additional thing. I read a play recently called 448 Psychosis, which is an impeccable play. It's about a very grim topic, taking one's own life, right? But it's, oh my god, I cried. It was one of the toughest reads I ever had to read, and I feel like it should be shared more because I don't think a lot of people know this play. But it would be nice to tell you guys about it. That might be the next thing that I read. Maybe like the next time I won't have a meeting after, and I can like finish this book, and then we can like read that play as like a bonus, you know? Let's move on to dirty trick number 18. Deny or defend inconsistencies. Manipulators know one looks bad when appearing to be inconsistent, saying one thing and doing another, or sometimes supporting X and sometimes attacking it. When caught in a contradiction, the manipulator has 2 choices. He can either deny that there is any contradiction at all. I really didn't say that. Or he can admit that the contradiction and defend it as a justifiable change. The world is changing and we must change with it. The fact is that human life and society are shot through with contradictions and inconsistencies. Those who have the most integrity are those who admit to contradictions and inconsistencies and work to minimize them. Manipulators work hard to cover them up. Dirty trick number 19. Demonize his side, sanitize yours. Most people are not sophisticated. To manipulate them into accepting your side, systematically use good words to characterize it, while you systematically use negative words to characterize your opponent. You believe in democracy, freedom, stability, compromise, fairness, strength, peace, protection, security, civilization, human rights, sovereignty, reformation, being open, defending the innocent, honor, God's comfort, normalcy, pride, independence, a mission, facing hardship. Your opponent believes in tyranny, suppression, conflict, terrorism, aggression, violence, subversion, barbarism, fantasticism, the spread of chaos, attacking the innocent, extremism, dictatorship, plots, cunning, cruelty, destruction. A variation on this strategy consists of sanitizing your motives by explaining your reasons to be righteous. I am not motivated by profit or greed. I do not want to enhance my power and influence. I don't want to control and dominate. Certainly not. I want to spread the cause of freedom, to share the good life and blessings of democracy, blah, blah, blah. It's literally written in there, blah, blah, blah. Right? You obscure your real motives that are often selfish and based on contradictions of considerations of money and power, while playing up motives that sound good and make you appear high-minded. This strategy is sometimes called finding the good reason and includes the practice of giving lip service to high-minded principles, asserting them loudly while ignoring in practice, you know? Dirty trick number 20. Evade questions gracefully. Okay, this is one that the president has been doing a lot recently. A lot. Like I can't describe it. Like it's I feel like he's doing it more than he's not, you know? He's not really answering a lot of the questions that people are proposing to him. He's evading them gracefully. Spin artists who face questions from an audience learn how to predict most of the hard questions they will face and how to evade them with skill and grace. One way to evade a hard question is to answer it with a joke that deflects the question. Another is to give a truistic answer. How long will the troops have to remain in country X? Answer: as long as it is necessary and not 1 day longer. A third is to give an answer so long and detailed that you manage by the length of your answer to slide from one question, a hard one, to another question, an easy one. Manipulators do not directly answer questions when direct answers would get them into trouble or force them to accept a responsibility they want to avoid facing. They learn to use vagueness, jokes, diversions, and truisms to their advantage. Dirty trick number 21. Flatter your audience. It's good to be talking to an audience of people with good old-fashioned common sense and real insights into our social problems. An intelligent person such as you will not be taken in by blah blah blah, you know? People are always receptive to flattery. Sometimes, however, one has to be subtle, or the audience may suspect you of manipulating them. Most politicians are highly proficient in the art of flattery. Their objective is to win over their audience. They want to lower the defenses of their audience, to minimize any tendency they might have to think critically about what is said. Dirty trick number 22. Hedge what you say. Manipulators often hide behind words, refusing to commit themselves to give direct answers. This allows them to retreat if necessary. If caught leaving out important information, they can then come up with some excuse for not being forthcoming in the first place. Or, if closely questioned, they can qualify their position so that no one can prove them wrong. In other words, when pressed, they hedge. To be an effective manipulator, you must be an effective weasel. You must weasel out of your mistakes, cover up your errors, and guard what you say whenever possible. Dirty trick number 23. This is the last one that we're going to read until I call it. Oh, but the next ones are so short though. No, I got a meeting. All right. One last one, and then we'll call it, and I will pick it up again next time. Dirty trick number 23. Ignore the evidence. This was traditionally called apyrism, which means invincible ignorance. So this is ignoring the evidence. In order to avoid considering evidence that might cause them to change their position, manipulators often ignore evidence. Usually they ignore the evidence in order to avoid having to consider it in their own minds, because it threatens their belief system or vested interests. Imagine a closed-minded Christian questioning whether it is possible for an atheist to live in an ethical life, lacking the guidance of the Bible. if such a person were confronted with examples of atheists who have lived self-sacrificing, compassionate lives, he would be uncomfortable in his view. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I did say that right. He would probably find a way to put the subject out of his mind to avoid the implications of the evidence. There's a lot of people, well, I think there's a few people who who've I've learned about who detransition, so to speak, out of religion because they actually took the time to critically think about their dogmatic beliefs. Mm-hmm. But that is just about all that I have time for, unfortunately. I wanted to read the whole book in one sitting, but I guess we're gonna have to save it for next time. I'm probably going to like show up again next week or something. Maybe I'll wear something a little different. I was doing like a little like kind of professional business-ish. Not really business-ish. Yeah, you'll see the full outfit on Instagram Saturday, unless I forget to post again. But thank you everyone so much for stopping by, watching this. If you missed any of this by any chance, you know, I always like post my VODs up on youtube.com/@nekasvodhole. You can check out the full stream. You can get all these words in with you. Hopefully you guys like enjoyed it. For those of you who stopped by, thank you Jan and Bill for stopping by in chat. I know your words aren't on the screen like it usually is, but you know, I wanted to like really focus these kind of streams. And I want to do more. I want to do more like these. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I will be continuing this next week, this book in particular. And if we have more time, maybe we'll check out 448 Psychosis as well, as like a little bonus. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for stopping by again. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Stay safe and read a freaking book. Later!